Welcome everyone to our first Queer Books Author Spotlight Series episode, and we have today acclaimed author of spicy MM romance and creator of the Teacher in Love series, including beloved titles like Teacher of the Year and Mistletoe Mishigas, because school teachers deserve both love and hot sex. Emma Wardell with us today.
Yay! Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here and excited to see all these questions you have for me.
We all know you are a teacher and then you ran your own business, but what made you go and decide like I'm gonna write a book and I'm going to become a published author?
I think that I am a little bit different than a lot of people who are authors. Like most authors that I know, or a lot of times when you talk to authors or hear them talk about what made you want to be a writer, they always talk about, when I was in the third grade, I wrote my first book, and they've been doing this forever and ever and ever. And that was not me at all. Um, I I never really envisioned myself as a person who was an author or a writer. It just wasn't something that was on my radar or something that I really thought about doing. I was a reader and I enjoyed reading books, but I didn't really think about myself as a writer. Now, that being said, in hindsight, as I look back on my life and like things that have happened up until this point, I guess I think I was always a storyteller. Like I like telling stories. When I was a teacher, one of the things that I really enjoyed doing was, in addition to reading books to my students, I would sometimes just tell them stories, like make up stories and tell them stories, which was really fun for me to do. So I think I've always been a storyteller, but I wasn't really an author. And so I was a reader, and I like probably a lot of people who are readers of romance, especially. I started with YA. Like that's kind of where I got my feet wet in reading a lot of YA. I think, if I think back, I try to think like, what was the first really queer book that I ever read? And I think it might have been, I can't remember if this was the first one or not, but I think it might have been Simon versus the Homo sapiens by Gail Bertelli. I think that might have been the first book. Like I think I read it pretty soon after it came out, which was a long time ago. I don't remember when that book came out, but it was a long time ago. I think over 10 years ago. Um, and I remember I was like, oh my gosh, this is like a book with gay people in it, like, oh. And then I have a friend, she's actually my best friend from high school, and we have stayed friends even since high school. Her name is Elise. Hey, Elise, you always see me thanking her in the back of my books. She actually was like, I remember growing up, even when we were kids, she was a writer. She's a writer, and she still is. Like and so like you have your friends and you're like, oh, this one is the writer and this one is the artist and this one, and like so I always thought of her as the writer. And she and I both would, one of the things that we talk about a lot is books, and she recommended a book to me around the same time, and I cannot remember the name of the author, but I'm going to tell you the name. I think I'm hoping I'm remembering the name of the book. It's called We Are the Ants, I think. Do you know this book?
Sounds familiar.
I think the author was like, I think his name starts with an A. I want to say it's like Anthony or Andrew. I think it's Andrew. You're looking it up on your phone, I can
Oh
tell.
yes. Oh, that's by Sean David Hutchinson. I actually have some
Oh, I
books
was
from
totally
him.
wrong. I said
I have
Andrew.
some books
Okay,
from him.
that book was really, really, really good. And I also remember thinking, oh, this is a book about a gay character and it's written by a man. Because I mean, based on the name of the author and the photo and everything in the book. For a while, I was reading a lot of YA books. And then I started to dabble in MM romance. And I'm probably, I mean, I'm embarrassed to say it, but like probably the first book I ever read that maybe was like a little bit spicy was Red, White, and Royal Blue, because it was popular, like it was a popular book. It kind of looks a little bit like YA, right? Like the way that
Yeah.
they marketed the book, it looked a little bit like YA. So it was kind of like the other books I was reading. And so I read it and I was like, oh, okay, well, this is like kind of, there's like, it's a little spicy. And that got me exploring more MM romance. And I started reading. more traditional MM romance that's like, not rom-coms. They're very like angsty. Some of the first people that I read were like Marley Valentine, and like no shade to Marley or any of those people, but those books are heavy. There's always like, it's the plot is always about like it usually centers like one of the main characters usually is dealing with like a death or like a lot of times there's sexual abuse. Like it's
Yeah.
like not a like I would like these are not rom-coms, right? Like clearly there's barely anything funny about these books, but the spice was spicy. So I was like, oh, okay. So I was like going back between these two worlds a little bit. And so then I was like, well, I want to read a book like Red, White, and Royal Blue that's a rom-com because I love rom-coms. I love rom-com books. I love rom-com. Like my movies go-to are rom-coms. And I'm like, I want to read a book like that, but I want the spice of these more traditional and then romances that are almost always indie, right? So I was like, well, let me see if I can find that. And I really didn't at the time. I could not find a book like that. And maybe there were some that existed at the time, but not. They weren't. This is something that AJ Truman and I have talked about. They weren't. There were some rom-coms, I think, but they weren't marketed as rom-coms. So, like to look at the cover, you would never look at that book and say, "Oh, that's a rom-com." So they were not on my radar. So I was like, stupidly, I was like, oh, I'll just write a book. But like maybe I could do that. Maybe I could write a book that's a rom-com like Red, White, and Royal Blue, but like really spicy. Saint is another book that a teacher friend actually, who I talked a lot about romance with, recommended. And I was like, oh my gosh, this book is so spicy. But again, not a
Yeah,
rom-com.
it is.
Um,
And the
it's
audiobook
not
is
a
great.
rom-com, but it's not a
Oh,
rom-com.
not at all.
There's like nothing comedic about it. It's just spicy. Anyway, so then this is what I will say, and you probably have other questions. This is the thing that you're going to learn about me very quickly. I like to talk. So like I might answer some of your other questions before you even ask them, just because you asked me one question and I'm like telling you a story because I like to tell stories. So then what I realized was that I have this horrible imposter syndrome because I'm not a writer. I'm not an author. I don't know how to write a book. So how am I going to do this? And what some people do, and everyone is different, but like I see people, and I'm not going to name names, but we could talk about it later, who just are like, I want to write a book. So I'm going to just sit down and write a book. And they just do it. And sometimes they can, like, and it's a good book. And sometimes you're like, oh, girl, you need to work on that. So for me, I knew that if I wanted to write a book, number one, I wanted it to be the best book I could write. Like I could not put out something that I didn't feel was the best I could make it. I'm not saying it's the best book in the world or anything like that, but the best that I could do. And so in order for me to do that, I said, what do I have? Like, how am I going to, how am I going to do this? Like as a teacher, one thing that we often do as teachers is it's called backwards planning, which is basically like, this is what I want to do. So what do I have to do? What are all the steps I need to take to meet that goal?
Yeah, you
And
gotta make a
so
plan. I was a teacher
yes,
too, I know.
oh, I didn't know that. What did you teach?
Graphic design, it's postgraduate.
Oh,
It wasn't high
adults.
school
Okay.
or
Yeah, yeah,
11th,
yeah.
it
Okay.
wasn't kids.
I mean, it's still teaching, but teaching adults is like, I don't know. That's not true. I have taught adults. It's totally different. It's just, it's a different kind of teaching, right? Like
Yeah.
it's totally different, but it's still teaching, obviously.
I did have a wide range of ages, like
Oh, I'm sure.
from 16-year-olds to 60-year-olds.
And so so like you have a goal, you have something you want people to be able to do. What do I have? Like, what are all and it's not just like sit down and write a book, right? Like for me, I was like, okay, what do I have to do? So I started reading craft books, like books about writing, and I started taking classes. So I don't even know how many classes I've taken, probably over 10 classes. And some of them have been like 1 day seminars where it's just like you spend a Saturday on Zoom, like and people are like giving you lessons on different topics about writing. And some of them have been like more of a writing workshop where it's like 10 weeks or something like that. And every week you meet and you get a little teaching and then you do a little writing and then they look at your writing and you pick it apart and you critique it and then you try to make the writing better. Which they call like a writing workshop. So for 2 years, I took classes and I read books and I kept reading more books in the genre. Like I kept reading more rom-coms and I kept reading MM romances just to like see what I like. I would read books and I'd be like, ooh, I really like how the person did this. And then sometimes I would read a book and be like, I don't like how they did this. So like I don't want to do that. And through that process, I started to develop the idea for Teacher of the Year, which was my first book. That book took me almost 2 years to write because
Wow.
I was really just writing slowly, and I was also using these classes to kind of help me.
Pretty much learning on the way.
I was learning, and then the other thing I did, which was like the best thing I ever did, and the best money I ever spent, and I wish more new authors would do it, was I hired a developmental editor, and that was like it was like taking another class, except the class was Teacher of the Year. Like she read my book and then gave me, 10 pages of notes and then comments throughout the manuscript. And it was like learning how to be a better writer using my book. And so that's what got me into it. I just was like, I want to read books that are romantic comedies, but also spicy, but also a lot of times when I would read these books, especially when they were not written by queer men, there were things that just did not feel authentic to my lived experience. I know
Mhm.
everyone has a different experience, right? But to my experience and also to um, my friends, my friends who are queer men. And so I was like, well, I want to write books that show that. And also I want to write books that show real people, Not everybody looks like the red, white, and royal blue guys. No shade to them. I wish we all looked like them.
We all wish.
But we don't. And even just like when you look at like every time I see an MM romance cover and it's just like, you know, it's like they're literally models, and that's fine because I get it. Romance is a fantasy, and I'm no different than anyone else. I
Hmm.
enjoy that fantasy as well, but I also think that it's important for us as queer people to have some realistic representation of who we are in media. And so that was really important to me. And that is why when you look at my books, sometimes it is just like some hunky guy, but not always. And I really try to include different, regular people,
Yeah, different body types. And
ages,
hey, I'm
you
just
know.
gonna say it. I hate covers with pictures. With just a model in the cover. It doesn't
But you know
attract
that
me at all.
I don't like them either, but here's the thing. You don't like them, and I don't really, they're not my favorite either. But here's what I'm going to tell you. If you go on Amazon and you look at the gay romance category, top 10 books,
Yeah.
I guarantee you at least 9 out of those 10 books, and perhaps all 10, but at least 90% of those books have models on the cover, which means even though they're not my favorite and they're not your favorite, that's what people like. And who are the people? I don't know, but it ain't me and you.
Yeah,
And the thing is,
definitely.
as an author, this is something that I've had conversations with other authors about. It's like, okay, well, maybe that's not my favorite type of cover, but I want to sell books,
Yeah.
And so that's why, and so people do it because they want to sell books. Part of the reason that I wanted illustrated covers is number one, an illustrated cover to me says rom-com. So like that was number one.
Yeah.
But number two, I knew that I was writing characters that it was going to be harder to get photograph models that look like the
Yeah.
characters I was writing. And so it just was easier to hire an illustrator to to draw what I want them
Yeah,
to look
how
like.
you picture them. Plus, it's like more personalized when it's illustrated because it's specifically for that book and those characters. When it's a picture model, hey, I've seen picture models that it's the same picture and the same model
Same.
in different books.
Yeah, I don't like that. I've seen that too, like a couple times. Because here's the thing, because I don't know as much about this because I've to this point, as like when we're recording this video, I've never had a model cover, so I don't know as much information. But I have friends who, like a lot of author friends who do use them, so I've talked to them a little bit. And I guess the way it works is when you, as an author, when you purchase the rights to that photograph, there's different levels that you can purchase that photo
Yeah,
of. So like you can purchase it and say like nobody else can use this person or whatever, and but it costs more money.
yeah.
And so people don't want to spend the money. And so it's cheaper if you just say like, oh, I like this picture of this, hot guy. And you just buy like that pose. I just feel like it perpetuates this real unrealistic expectation for queer men about what we are supposed to look like. We're supposed to look like that. We're supposed to look like we spend every day in the gym and we never eat bread or ice cream and we run 10 miles a day. And I don't know. I don't want to see, like, I don't know what those men do to look that way, but clearly they were not just born that way, right? Like nobody has a body like that naturally. Or if they do, well, good for them.
Definitely
But most
blessed.
people, yeah, most people do not have naturally have a body like that. So like I just feel like, and that's the other thing, like I joke about it, but it's like the guys in these books, like you'll read the whole book and they never once talk about going to the gym. They never once talk about like eating healthy. But to look at them on the cover, or
Hell, they
who
be
like,
eating burritos and ice cream before doing it.
well, so I mean, how are you eating? Like, how are you living a lifestyle that doesn't include fitness and diet, specific dieting and health, but yet that's what you look like on the cover? It just doesn't make sense, right? It does not make sense. But those people make a whole lot more money than I do. They sell more books than I do, and they make more money than I do. So, you know, what
Good
do
for
I know?
them. And
Good for
hey,
them.
it's fine. I don't
You
love
know,
the models on the covers, and I'm not like shading them. Like do whatever you
no, I
prefer
mean,
and
and
whatever sells for you. But yeah, I don't like them.
I mean, I get it. Like, like I said, I've had conversations with people where, they sell. Like, and one thing that I know about, because I've compared data, my sales data with some friends who are, some of my author friends, like we talk about sales and money and royalties and things because it's good to have people that you're close with that you feel comfortable talking about that with. And what I notice when we do that comparison, those people that have those covers, this is like I'm speaking in like a sweeping generalization, right?
Mhm.
But generally speaking, they are selling the majority of their money they're making from ebook or like Kindle Unlimited. Like people are not reading the paperback, right? Like they are reading it on a device. My books, um, it's about 50-50 the amount of money that I make from devices and like audiobook and things like that, and paperback. Like I sell a lot of paperbacks. And I think that's because people like my covers and like they're not like a half naked man. Like you could hold my book on the subway and not be mortified.
Yeah, they are discreet. They don't know how filthy it is inside.
Exactly. I mean, there's two men, but it looks fairly innocent,
Yeah.
you know. It's funny. So here's a funny story. That's not about me, but I'm still going to tell you. So AJ Truman, who like we wrote a book together and we are very, very good friends. Like we talk a lot, we chat, we text, things like that. He sent me a text the other day and he said, I need your opinion on some models, like some model cover poses or something like that. And I texted back to him and I said, I said, only if they're naked. And he replied to me, well, they're close. And then he sent me like it was basically it, he said at one point he goes, I feel like you're at the eye doctor because he was sending me like two pictures of the same guy in like a slightly different pose, and he was like, A or B? Which one do you like better? And then he like would, and I would tell him which one and why, and then he would send me like a different guy with two different poses. But they're like they are not naked, but they definitely are not wearing a lot of clothes. But that sells. It sells, you know? And so who am I to say? Like my books are very spicy. So even though the covers don't look like it, the word has gotten out that if you buy a book that's written by M.A. Wardell, it's going to be very spicy. So that helps sell books.
Well, that was just the first question, but you answered a
But
couple.
see, I told you.
Next one will be, why did you decide to do it self-published?
So when I was drafting my first book, like when I was writing the book, I didn't think about how I was going to publish the book. Like I didn't even really think about that, like publishing. I was just wanting to write this book and then like see what happens. Because the way my brain works, I was like, well, it probably won't be any good. So I wasn't even thinking about publishing. So then once the book got to the point where I sent it to my developmental editor, who is her name's Amy Spalding, and she actually writes queer rom-coms, mostly sapphic books, and she's hilarious. I love her. Um, and she read the book and was helping me with it. And she said, she's like, Matt, this is really a good book. Like, you have to publish this book. It's so good. And I was like, really? And I was like, well, I am paying her to help me, so maybe she's just being nice because that's how my brain works, right? And so I was like, yeah, whatever. So then I had like a couple of other people read it, and people were reading it in some of these classes, like reading parts of it anyway. And people kept saying how much they loved it and all that, and I should really publish and blah blah blah. I was like, oh, okay, well then how am I going to publish? So for a while, I was kind of on the fence. I didn't know if I wanted to go the traditional route, which if people don't know what that means, traditional publishing means that you have to get an agent, and there's a whole process to getting an agent where you have to write a query letter and you send it to agents and you hope that they like your letter. And if they like your letter, they might ask to read your book. And then if they like your book, they might say they want to represent you. That's just getting an agent.
Mhm.
Then your agent has to try to sell your book to a publisher. And that can take years. And sometimes there's some statistics, and I don't remember what they are because it's math, but there's some statistic where like it's a high percentage of people's first books don't get sold, and they end up just saying, well, this is stupid, and they write a second book, and then so that's the book they usually sell. So I was like, oh my gosh, do I want to go through all that? Like, I was like, I don't know. And then, I did have one person, and I won't say who the person is because it's an author who some people might know, who told me. It was a person that I knew through like a class situation, and kind of said that my book was too spicy for traditional publishing because it was written by a man. Like maybe if it had not been written by a man, maybe. And so I was like, well, this person knows more than I do because they're a published author and they're traditionally published. So I was like, that really made me think, maybe I'll just do it myself. And so that's what made me decide to self-publish. And the rest is history. Here we are.
And I love it.
But I will say, I do think that traditional publishing is starting to open their eyes and wake up to the more spicy queer romance and rom-coms and seeing how successful they are. And it's not unlikely that you might see some traditionally published spicy rom-coms there are starting to be, right? Like, there are some people like Timothy Janowski, like his books are starting to get a little spicier. I wouldn't say that they're at the same level of like the indie
Mhm.
romance rom-com spice, but they are getting spicier. I'm trying to think. I haven't read it yet, but it's on my TBR. I'll have what he's having. Did you read that book?
Oh, I have it. That's from Adib Khorram.
Yes. Have you read? You haven't read it.
No, not yet, but I bought it
But
recently. It's pretty
I
new.
have it. Yeah, it just came out a few months ago, I think. But I've heard that it's spicy. But
Yeah,
like the thing is, when someone tells me that a traditionally published book is spicy, to me, that means it's not very spicy.
it's like low spice.
It's low spice. So we'll see. But I think what's happening is traditional publishing is seeing the success that indies are having, and they are waking up and they want in on it because they are not, they're business people.
They're
They,
gonna make they're
they
gonna make
want to
their
make money
money.
too.
They
Right.
want it.
So stay tuned. That's all I can say.
And where do you draw inspiration to write your books and bring all these wonderful characters to life? Like, where do you draw the inspiration to create characters like Olin, Theo, Sheldon, Marvin?
You know, different different characters come from different places, but a lot of these main characters come from they're inspired by people that I know, sometimes multiple people. Like, so there'd be like a little bit of, like Theo is a really good example. Theo is really like a mix of like three real people that I know or like have known in my life. Sheldon is based on a person that I know, a friend of mine who is a gay man, who is a teacher, who is very effeminate, and I had discussions with him. This was like when I was kind of coming up with the concept for the book.
Mhm.
I had was visiting with him and had all these discussions about like what it's like to be to walk through the world like him, and how, you know, I'm not saying that it's the same thing, but I'm just using it as an example. Please,
Mhm.
I don't want to I'm not trying to get canceled here on your bindery. But like, how people will say like if you're a person of color, when you walk in a room, like you can't not be a person of color. Like you
Mhm.
can't hide it. Well, this friend of mine who is not a person of color, he's white, but he is so effeminate looking, acting, talking, mood, the way he moves. Like he's just very, very effeminate. And he was saying that he can't hide it. Like when he walks in a room, everyone in that room, they know he's gay. And then we started talking about how like those types of gay men in media are almost always represented as like the funny best friend or like this, the sidekick or, the gay best friend. This is like an older example, but if you think back to that movie, My Best Friend's Wedding with Julia Roberts, and she had the gay best friend, and
Yeah.
he wasn't like super effeminate, but like you knew he was gay, like right away. Like there was no doubt that that guy was gay. And that was the whole joke, right? And so he was like, and so I was thinking, like, why can't that person ever get a love story? Like, be the main character, not be the comic relief. So, like, that's where that idea came from. Um, Olin came from this idea that often, and I mean, this is just a stereotype, but sadly, it's a stereotype, and so people buy into it. Often, especially in books and movies and TV, Black men are represented a certain way, and it's not a positive way, right? So I
Mhm.
was like, I'm gonna make the hunk like that's like he's a scientist and he's rich, like he's like all the like I'm gonna turn that on its head. Like everything that people are negative, I'm gonna like flip it on its head and make him not any of those things. So it was kind of like a little bit of a rebellion thing that I did. Like, and also like we don't see a ton of people of color as love interests. Like it just
Mhm.
doesn't. I'm not saying you don't you see it. Like it's not that it doesn't exist, but it's not often. Like and I've had conversations with authors and they say, there's a very famous MM romance author who I don't want to say her name because I don't want to like spill her tea, but I had a conversation with her or I saw her write about this. Maybe it wasn't, I didn't talk to her, but like she was talking about it and I was listening where, her books sell, like sell. She puts a black man on the cover and the book doesn't sell.
Wow. It doesn't
as
surprise me.
well. And so when you look at the cover that she was talking about, he's beautiful. He's like the most beautiful black man you've ever seen. Like he's he's like all those model. He's a model, but he's black. And so just doesn't sell as well. So that was kind of where Olin came from. I was like, if I'm gonna write a book and I'm gonna have this like love interest, I'm not, it's he's not gonna be white. And then also I really wanted to for the first book that I wrote, I knew that I wanted it to be a single POV book because of the story in Teacher of the Year.
Hmm.
That you're not supposed to know certain things and you're not supposed to find out certain things until later in the book. So that really works better for single POV. And I knew that I wasn't probably like, it didn't feel right for me to write the first person POV of a person of color. So that worked for that book as well. So yeah, they come from all different places. I mean, like Kent, the principal that like people love, and he's in the second book, and then he's in the
Hmm.
main character in the third book. It was inspired by a principal that I know that's like kind of someone that I'm a little bit friendly with, who's actually not even gay. He's straight and married to a woman, but um he's just like that kind of a guy. And I was like, I want to write him, but he's got to be bi if he's going to be in my book. So, it's so they're like they're like inspired, and then sometimes you just make up characters too. Like, I mean, like this cowboy book that I'm writing now, like these characters are totally made up. They're not inspired by anyone in particular. They're just made up.
So when you're writing, how do you come up with the themes and messages that you want to include in the story? Like we know Theo in Mistletoe Mishigas has PTSD, he's a veteran, and he has his traumas and his issues. How do you come up with that? For example, also in Teacher of the Year, we know Olan has another issue also.
He's a recovering alcoholic. Again, like this is something that I see, I just was engaging with some content on TikTok about this. There's so many stories with gay men where it's either a coming out story, which like I get it, like we have like that's valid. None of these are invalid, but it's just like that you see the same themes over and over.
Hmm.
It's a coming out story, like that's number one. We always get that. Um, or it's like some kind of tragedy that has to do with being gay, like like their family doesn't accept them, or I don't know, they have some kind of trauma around being queer. Or like the thing on TikTok that I commented on, and I might have been your video or it might have been someone else, I can't remember, the popularity of SA, sexual assault. Like you're a gay man, and when you were younger you were sexually assaulted, and so
Hmm.
now you have like that is like the most popular thing going right now. And it's like, okay, I'm not saying that those stories don't happen. Obviously, like those are all, coming out and trauma and sexual assault are things that queer men deal with. But it is disproportionately represented and disproportionately popular in MM romance. Like the amount of it
Yeah.
is so. And so I was like, I want to write about men who have like I am a gay man and I have a lot of gay friends, and we deal with issues that are real issues that are not those issues.
Yeah, like we're so
So,
much more than those three things.
yeah, right. It's like more than coming out. Like, I mean, once you're like not in your 20s anymore, if like you came out when you were in high school, or if you came out when you were in college, or even like your mid 20s or something, once you're like in your 30s, like you're coming out, like how often does anyone even ask you about coming? Like, when did you come out? Like, nobody asks me that anymore. It's so not a part of my story. Like it is, because I mean, obviously I came out, but it was so long ago and there's so many more interesting things to talk about. So I wanted to just explore other things. That's why so far I've never written about the youngest characters I've ever written are like early 30s. Like I don't write about guys in their teens and 20s because everyone else is writing about them. So like I don't want to do that. And so I just wanted to show like queer men that have more to them. There's more. fabric to their identity than just like the things that we have already mentioned. So, like I have people in my life and friends and, family that are in recovery. And that is something that you don't see talked about a lot in books, at least the ones that I was reading. So I was like, I think that's something that probably some people could connect with. Theo being a veteran. So I'm not a veteran at all, but like I know some people who are veterans. I have some family members who are veterans, and I know what that does to you, when you are in active combat. And so I wanted to show like what that might look like. And like Sheldon, he is shunned from his family. That is part of his story, but it's not part of the book, right? It's almost just like it's like, it does color who he is a little bit because he
Hmm.
doesn't have contact with his family, but it's not like a big plot. It's not a plot point in the book. It's something that happened a long time ago, and it's not something that, is happening right now.
It
Um,
pretty much serves as a way to understand his relationship with his sister. I would say it
exactly.
that way.
Exactly. Like someone sent me a message a couple of days ago on, I think it was Instagram. Someone I don't know, a reader sent me a message and said that, he he could tell when he read, oh no, it wasn't a message. It was a review that they wrote, but they tagged me, but it was a good review, so it was fine. It was for Marshmallow
We
Mountain, the
like
book that I
those.
wrote with AJ. Yeah, we like when they tag us and it's nice. But he said it was a very nice review, but he said I read lots of romance, and and I love a lot of these books, and a majority of these books are not written by gay men, and some of them I really like and I really enjoy. He said, but when I read this book, I could tell that this was written by people who have a lived experience as gay men. And that, me and AJ were like high-fiving each other, because that's part of why I want to do this. Like, I want someone like you to read my book. And as a gay man, there are little things that only a gay man would write. And that's purposeful.
That's true, people. I can attest to it.
It's funny. Okay, I probably shouldn't say this, but me, I'll say it anyway. When AJ and
I can
I were
bleep it.
writing, well, I think it's fine. If you think it's not fine, you can bleep it. When AJ and I were writing the book, we wrote in a Google Doc, and we would write back at, like, I would write for a couple of days and then he would write and we would kind of go back and forth. And part of it was we would also leave each other notes, like little comments about things like to notice this or notice that, or blah, blah. And one of the things, and AJ did this probably a little bit more than I did, he would write something like a line or a joke or something, and he would say something like, only a gay man would write this. Like, only a gay man would, have this reference to Mean Girls there's a whole little joke in Marshmallow Mountain about Mean Girls. He's like, only I, could write this. Um, and it's true, I mean, obviously it's not true. Anyone could write it, but you don't see it, or at least I don't see it in other books. I do think, because I read a lot of romance, and most of it is not written by gay men. But for me, I feel like there are some authors, and I don't know why. I can imagine that they have gay men in their lives, like friends or family, maybe close, I don't know. Or maybe they're just somehow they just seem more in tune with gay culture, queer culture. And
Hmm.
some of those books, you read them, and they just have a different vibe to them. And those are the authors that I tend to gravitate towards. And those are the authors that I enjoy the most. And there's a few of them. I mean, it's not just like one person. Do you want me to tell you who they are?
You can send me the list.
Okay. They're all indie.
Now that you're mentioning Marshmallow Mountain, can I know who wrote which character, or did you wrote both?
So this is what happened. Okay. So when we drafted the book, so that's like when we were like first writing the book, um, we did each write a different character, but very quickly, like probably, within by the time we hit like 50%, we were kind of writing both. And then when we started revising the book, I was revising more heavily the chapters that AJ wrote, and he was revising more heavily mine. And so we agreed, meaning AJ and I, that we were just going to say we both wrote the whole thing because really, I've had some people guess, and usually they're wrong because I think you can't tell. Like that's the whole thing. I think it's probably
I
it's
said it in my
it
review. I've read at least one AJ Truman book. I read all of yours, and I couldn't tell who wrote who because your styles
because
are very similar.
our styles are similar, and we also like it was very important that the voices of each of the characters was uh consistent throughout the book. So while I did draft one of the characters, I made sure that I was looking at all the dialogue and all the parts where that character was in all of the book. And then there were also things like, okay, so like people who know AJ know, like he's really funny. Like that's kind of what he's known for. He's super funny. He can write really funny jokes. And so if I was drafting a joke and it just didn't feel like it was funny or it, I feel like it could be better, I would leave him a note and say, can you make this joke funnier or can you give me some suggestions for this joke? And so even though it was my chapter, he wrote the joke. Um, and then, also people know that I'm kind of known for the spice. Like that's kind of what I'm known for. So even if it was his chapter, I might have been a little bit more involved writing the spicy part. So it truly is both of us that wrote the whole thing. And I'm so happy like that people are enjoying it because I feel like that book is like a reflection of the friendship that AJ and I created. And so it makes me happy that people like appreciate that because I love AJ. And so it's like, I mean, I don't have children, but like I would imagine if you were with someone and you had a baby and you'd be like, oh my gosh, this baby is like, it's like something we created together. And that's how I feel about this book. Like it's our baby that we created together.
It worked great because the book, you can tell it was written by two different authors. It's coherent. You don't feel like there's two different voices fighting. People go and read Marshmallow Mountain. Plus, it's a holiday book. We're in the holiday season. It's perfect for now.
And I mean, it was very intentional, like that. We really worked at that. And so now we're actually getting ready in January, in just less than a month, we're going to start writing the next book.
When's it coming out?
I think it has a date, but I can't remember what it is. It's on
Is it caught to the
Amazon.
feeling?
Yeah,
September 30.
September 30.
Yeah.
Okay, that's when it comes out. But I'm excited about that book. We've already like we've had some meetings on Zoom where we like planned and we have an outline and we have the character work. We've done some character work. So we're like there's like work you have to do to get ready to write a book, for at least that's the way I work and he does too. So we're doing that preliminary work so that when January comes, we can start writing the books. I'm excited about that book. It's going to be um, cute. I think it's going to be very cute.
And I have two questions in one now. Of all the books you've written, which one would you say is the most special to you? And of all
Mm.
the characters, which one is the one that you like connect in a more personal level?
I think the book that, well, I mean, I could say every one of my books, I could use that. I could say it's that book for a different reason. Like every book is special for a different reason. Like I mean, Teacher of the Year, that was the first book I ever wrote. So like that always is special to me. But if I had to pick the most special that I've written so far, it probably would be Husband of the Year, which is finished. It's totally finished. So like I can say that book is done, even though it's not out yet. And that book was emotional. Like I didn't know how emotional I was going to be writing that book. And it was challenging for me because I'm like writing this book about a couple that already exists. It's not
Mhm.
most romance books, it's like there's a meet cute and they don't like they don't know each other, or if they do know each other, it's like they haven't seen each other or they're friends or somehow they're not a couple and then they become a couple. And this book is not like that. This book, they start as a couple and they end as a couple. So I was like, oh my God, wait, how do I do this? I had to kind of like really rethink the structure of a romance book and what that was look like and what does a, and what it really is in a way is it's like my love letter to this series because all of the characters are in this book. I want to say there are no new characters. Like all of the side characters are people you've already met. Some of them have bigger roles in this book because it's a different story. So they have a different, they have a bigger role. Um, but you know, Sheldon and Theo are in it a lot. Vincent probably more than Kent because Vincent is Marvin's like really best, like his best friend. He's in it quite a bit as well. Um, and it just was emotional. Like I wasn't expecting it to be like I would just be writing and then all of a sudden I'd be crying. I was like crying all the time. It's a very emotional book. And I mean, I don't want to give away too many things, but there's my husband has read it and he said he's calling it my I don't know how to say this person's name correctly, so I'm probably going to massacre it, but he's like, this is your M. Night Shyamalan book. What's that guy? Because there are some surprises. Like it's you start the book and you're like, "Ooh, ba, 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 ba," and some things come up that nobody would ever expect, I think, in a book written by me or in an M book. There are some tropes that I will not use when I market the book because I don't want to spoil surprises. It's a very emotional book, and I just love it. Like I'm so proud that and then like when you do something, every book I've written, I've done something that has been like new, like Mistletoe Mishigas, even though like it doesn't seem like a big deal. When I wrote the book, I had never written a dual point of view book. So that was the first time I was doing that. So I was like, oh my God, I don't know. Can I do this? And then Napkins and Other Distractions. That book has a lot of spice, a lot more spice. And it starts very soon and at the beginning of the book. So I was like, and also like the character Vincent has OCD, and it's a very when you have that kind of OCD, it's pervasive and it's part of your entire, character. And so I that was challenging for me. And this book, Husband of the Year, which I already said, it's not a traditional story as far as like they know each other, they are engaged when the book starts. So I was like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? Because the thing about books and movies and things like that is there's a structure for a reason, right? Like, and so when you play with that structure, you still have to have like even though people think they want this, nobody wants to read a book where they start out happy and then they're happy, 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 and then it's a happy ending. People don't want to read that. It's not fun.
You're
You
gonna
want to
have
go on a
conflict.
journey. Yeah. So I was like, okay, but me also, so many people said to me, you're not going to break them up, are you, Marvin and Olin? Like, they're not going to have a breakup, are they? And honestly, I didn't want to break them up. So I was like, okay, they start out happy and of course, I mean, spoiler alert, it ends happy. It's a romance. They're not going to break up. What kind of conflict am I going to have
How can I destroy their lives?
for a little bit, but not break them up? So it was very challenging. And then once I figured that out, then I had to like see, could I execute it? Um, and I just love the book so much. And I hope people love it as much as I do. The people who have read it, which is not very many people, maybe like five people have read it. Everyone says to me, if this book comes with a PR box, it has to have a box of tissues in it. And I mean, I cried writing it. And even like, so then like part of my process when I'm doing revisions, you have to read the book over and over and over and over in sections and then the whole book over and over again. And there were a few parts in that book every time I read them, I cried. And knew what was happening because I wrote it and I had already read it multiple times and I still cried. So I just love it. It's also like a little bit, I think the reason I would pick that book as like my favorite or most special, whatever you want to call it, it's a little bit like it's a little bit of a love letter to my husband because it's a what this book does that's different than like a traditional romance is it says, what does it look like when two people are in love, like how does it change, like how does your relationship grow and change when you're together more than 5 minutes, which is what most romance books are. It's like we meet and we fall in love and like the whole thing is like the whole book is, what, a month, 2 months, 3 months,
Hmm.
whatever, like it's a short amount of time. Well, husband of the year is like 2 years after teacher of the year. So they're together, they live together. And so what's like how do things change and evolve? And so like and that's something that, personally, like I've been married for a while. And so like your relationship changes and grows and you grow as people and do you grow together and like what and all I think all of my books and I think most queer books there's an undercurrent if it's not like a like a scream trope of found family. Like, what does family mean when you're a queer person? Because it can mean different things. And so this book, more than any of them, really, really is about that. Like what I think in the blurb, it said the tagline that I wrote for the book is like something like, family isn't just about blood. It's like, and that is what this book is. And I will also say, and then I'll stop talking. The other thing that I'm so proud of in this book, so you met her in Teacher of the Year, Isabella, who's Olen's ex-wife. She comes in like at the very end of the book, and you kind of think she's going to be this villain, and it turns out that she's not. She is a major character in this book, and I just love writing this family that decides that they are going to work together to be a family. And like that whole it's a little bit cliche, but like, it takes a village, like, you can't do it by yourself. Um, and how her and Marvin develop a friendship and a relationship, like, okay, well, you're gonna we're what does that mean if I'm marrying this man that his ex-wife is the mother of this little girl.
Hmm.
What does that make us? How are we going to and I really explored that quite a bit in this book. And I just love her so much. And I hope people love her too. Because she's she gets a little bit more, she gets a lot more. Like she's a big character in this book. So I don't know. Who knows what people are gonna think? I love it though.
You
It
answered
wasn't
one
a
of the
wedding.
questions
What was the
with
second one?
the character that you relate the most to.
Well, probably Marvin. And people who like my friends when they read Teacher of the Year, they kind of give me the side eye because I mean I have a lot in so Marvin is like me on steroids. Like I'm not I'm not as fill in the blank as he is, I'm not as horny, Jewish, uh anxious, like all the things that he's like over the top. I'm not over the top, but I am all those things. So I do have a like I think I probably relate to him the most. I was a kindergarten teacher. I mean, I taught other grades as well, but I did teach kindergarten. Um, so but I will also say, like, and I think a lot of authors would say this, I have something that I relate to in all of the characters, like even Sheldon and Theo, like there are pieces of me in them, even though they're based on other people and all that. But that's just what happens when you write. Like you inject yourself a little bit into all of your characters. But probably the most would be probably Marvin.
And now I have a really stupid question.
Oh, I love a stupid question.
What are your favorite words to use when you're referring to the eggplant and the peach?
Oh,
I can't believe them.
no, I mean, it's your. I don't know where you're putting the video, like if you're allowed to say bad words, but it's up to you. You don't have to bleep it for me. Um, for me, when you're talking about, okay, so like to say it like the most like when I would talk to children, because sometimes you have to talk to kids about the body, like body parts. It's a penis, right? Like that's the medical term for it. It's a
Yeah.
penis. I don't like that word in a romance because there's nothing romantic about the word penis. But for you, so that we know what we're talking about. To me, it's almost always I'm either going to use dick or cock. That's it. The only other thing I will do, I will use shaft when I'm talking about that part of a dick. Like the shaft is your dick is made of, you have balls or testicles, but that's not sexy. So we usually say balls. Um, you have a shaft and you have like a head and then the tip.
Hmm.
So I will use shaft, head, and tit, but those are talking about like those parts of. I don't like using shaft in the place of the word dick or cock. So pretty much what I do is I just alternate between dick and cock, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Um, because as a man and as a person who is like has a lot of male friends and things like that, that's what we call it. And then your butt, I'm trying to think, what did we say for like at school when we were talking about that? I think we would say butt or like behind. Um, I mean, it's an ass. Like that's what it is.
Hmm.
And same thing, like, there are parts to your ass. Like you have ass cheeks. There is like your hole, which like the only thing about hole is that it can become very redundant if you just keep saying hole, 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 hole. But like what
Hmm.
else are you gonna call it? Opening, entryway, like,
Entrance.
yeah. I mean, I think I've used those a little bit, but mostly I just call it an ass or like um I think the other thing you can do is like when you're writing about that, you can say it once and then like within the next few sentences or the paragraph, you don't have to like it's assumed where you are on that person, so you don't have to keep saying ass over and over again. I think I use butt sometimes too. I don't mind butt, but like ass is basically what it is.
Is what
Why?
it
What are
is.
yours? Now
Oh,
I'm
those
asking
exactly.
you.
I like call it what it
Great.
is.
Okay. Yeah, call it what it is.
If
I
it's a
actually
spicy
think,
book, be nasty.
and also as a reader, that's hotter to me when you just call it what it is. Like, so, when people say that I write such great spice, it's like, well, because I'm not condescending. I'm not trying to hide it. I think when you don't want to use the real words, it gives this indication that there's some shame.
Yeah,
And
maybe.
part of like what I want to do is I want my books, like part of the reason I like to write spicy books is to erase shame. Because I do think a lot of gay men have shame around their bodies, have shame
Hmm.
around sex for whatever reason, right? Like we don't need to go into all the reasons because there's probably many, but for whatever reason, people have shame. And I want people to not be ashamed of their body or ashamed of sex or feel shame around sex. And so uh that's why I write the books the way that I write them. Like it's very sex positive. There's always a lot of consent, right? Like my guys are always checking in, like because to me, like what is so hot is when you're having sex and someone asks you, "Does it feel good? Do you like it? How is that? How does that feel?" Like that's hot,
We
as
love it.
opposed to like assaulting someone and like not caring, like which is what I guess. I mean, I don't read some
Which
of these
you know
books.
what? I've been reading a lot of gay manga, which is like Japanese comics that are explicit. And there's this thing about this genre that there's a lot of dubious consent. That sometimes it's a little bit rapey, and I'm like,
Yeah,
but why? It's not necessary.
yeah,
Not always. I can understand
right,
if it has like something you want to tell in the story and you need to.
right. And
But
I,
sometimes it's like
and
so
like
gratuitous, like it's not necessary.
And people can read what they want, people can write what they want. Some people write full on rape, like, and if that's what they want to write and people like it and want to read it, that's their prerogative.
Yeah.
But for me, that's not what I want to read, and it's not what I want to write. Like, I want to write hot consensual sex between men who are like not 20.
What are you working on?
The thing that I'm actually writing right now, like as we speak, I was writing this morning. I'm working on a shared world with three other authors, queer authors. I'm excited about it because often when you see these shared worlds, they're all MM. Like it's like there's a couple of college ones that are very popular, and it's like 10 authors, and they're all MM books, which is fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. But I'm excited because the way this was pitched to me was um, as a queer shared world that's queer. Like, it's not just MM. So there's four of us working together. So it's Cleo Evans, who writes a lot of different pairings. Like, she writes MM, she writes MF, a lot of non-binary characters, a lot of trans characters, a lot of poly characters, like poly, not characters, but like the story's poly.
Mhm.
So Cleo, Ashley Bennett, who writes a lot of monster romance and has also written MM, MF, Sapphic. Um, and then Max Walker, who writes MM as well as me. So it's the four of us, and it's called the series is called Rainbow Ranch. So it's a ranch in Wyoming. No, yeah, Wyoming. No, Oklahoma. Oklahoma. I get all those square states confused. It's in Oklahoma. Yeah, it's in Oklahoma. Um, and it doesn't matter. It's a ranch, right? It's in the middle of nowhere, and there's four siblings. So each one of us is writing a book about one of the siblings, and they're all queer. So my book is MM, Max's book is MM, Ashley's book is Sapphic, and Cleo's book is Polly. So there's three characters, and it's a male, a female, and the third person is non-binary. And
Okay.
because why not? Cleo's brother, who's the M in her poly romance, is identical twins with my brother. So we got some twins, although, like we're not writing anything like it's nothing like taboo or anything like that. It just so happens that they're twins. And so I'm working on that, and it's so fun because it's basically a cowboy romance. So they're like, they're on this ranch and there's horses, and it's different than anything I've ever written. And I'm not a cowboy or a country person, so I have to do a lot of reading and research, which is fun for me. Like, that's part of writing that I really enjoy when it's something that I don't know a lot about and I have to learn. Like, I don't know anything about horses, and I'm having to learn about horses. So that's what I'm working on right now. And that comes out in next summer, I think in July. And all four books it'll be like in a month, they'll all be out. It'll be like, I think my book is first, and then I think Ashley's book, and then Cleo's books, and then Max's book, maybe. I can't remember the order, but it'll be like one a week. Boom, 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 boom. So within a month,
Oh,
the whole series will
that
be out.
fast?
Yeah. And
Wow.
they are very well, I don't know. I can't speak for their books, but for mine, it's very like all of the side characters in my book are the siblings. So like the goal, and part of the reason we're doing this is we want to encourage people to read beyond MM, right? Like, a lot of people say, like, I read queer books. It's like, no, you don't. You read MM. So that's part of where the idea came from, is to try to help people open their minds to more than MM. So the hope is that when you read my book is first, you're like, oh my gosh, I want to know more about this hot sister lesbian on the ranch. And so then you want to read Ashley's book, right? Like, even though maybe you've never read a sapphic book before. And also you fall in love with my guys who will be in Ashley's book. So like, that's the hope. Um, cross my fingers. And then in January, AJ and I are writing the second book um, in that series. So, and that book is Bryce, who is in the first book, Marshmallow Mountain. He is one of the main characters in this book. And the musical inspiration for this book is Carly Rae Jepsen. Although I will say, I'm not a big Carly Rae Jepsen fan. Like I like her and I know some of her songs, so I have to really start listening before we write. Like I really have to like just listen to her music so that I can use song references and things like that. And that's what I'm working on like through probably, March of next year.
Love it. What do you hope readers take away from your books?
I hope readers take away that that queer men are more than just fill in the blank, that queer men are like complicated, complex people just like everyone else. And also like, the whole point of reading romance and rom-coms is like the power of love, right? Like if people always say like what's the theme of your book? Love. Like that's what it is. Like the whole reason that you read romance is to believe in love, right? Like anyone can fall in love. There's a person for everyone. Just because you're not finding your soulmate at like 20 doesn't mean that you're going to be alone forever. I mean, in Napkins, one of the main characters is 52, right? Like your life doesn't end at 40, right? So there's hope for everyone. It doesn't matter what you look like, and it also doesn't matter like what issues you're dealing with in your own personal life. You are worthy of being loved.
Like, hey, your life ends when you die.
Exactly.
Meanwhile, try everything and anything.
Yes.
Have a word game. I'm gonna tell you
Okay.
a word, and you're gonna tell me which of your books comes to your mind first when you hear that word.
Oh, okay. I like that.
First word, trauma,
Mistletoe and Mishigas.
joy,
Probably Mistletoe and Mishigas.
hope,
Husband of the Year. I know it's not out. Nobody's read it, but
passion,
oh, napkins.
cock,
Probably napkins as well.
chaos,
Probably Marshmallow Mountain.
heartbreak,
Marshmallow Mountain.
family,
Husband of the Year.
growth,
Husband of the Year.
ass.
All of them. I guess maybe mistletoe because like Theo really does have a thing, but so does Kent in napkins. So it's hard to say. Probably all of them. I mean, there's like that's in every book.
Hey,
I
you
know.
didn't mention
Sorry.
teacher of the year.
I know. Well, because I don't know. I feel like that book is so popular. Like that, I'm telling you, like, and this is common. People have told me this too. When you have a series, it's always the first book that's the most popular. Like that book, still, I'm shocked how many people are still like discovering it, reading it for the first time. Like the number of sales that I get on that book is surprising to me because it's been out for almost 2 years now, and people are still discovering it. But hey, what do I know?
So M.A. Wardell is telling us that teacher of the year is overrated. He's done with it.
No, no, no. It's surprising, I said to someone that I was like, wouldn't you think everyone who wants to read it would have read it by now? And they were like, no, you think that, but it's not the case.
Listen, I have books on my shelves since 2022 that I haven't even looked at. It doesn't happen to the spicy ones, but it happens.
I know someone says there's no spice, and it's like, well, I'll read it, but
Can you present us a guest?
this is my cat who is purring very loudly. His name's Kermit.
He's adorable. What's his name?
Kermit.
Kermit.
So this is a fun fact about me that you may or may not, well, you don't know, but I'll tell you, and then you might know part of it. So when I adopted, so I have two cats, Kermit, who's with me right now, and the other cat is a girl, and her name is Robin. Both of those are Muppets. Kermit and Robin are both Muppets. But I did not name them. When I adopted them, they both came with those names. But I do like them. I am a Muppet fan, so I was like, oh my gosh, this is weird. Like, what this is just it's like kismet. It's meant to be. And so as an ode to my cats, all of the animals in every book that I have written so far have been named for a Muppet.
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't notice.
So Gonzo is the cat in Teacher of the Year. Obviously, that one's
Yeah.
obvious because it's like Gonzo. But Janice is the cat in Mistletoe, Sheldon's cat. Janice is a Muppet. She's in the band, she's kind of like a hippie. She's like, hey guys. She's the one, I think, the only girl in the band. And then in Napkins, the cat's name is oh my gosh, I forgot its name. Oh, Sweetums. Sweetums is a Muppet. In Marshmallow Mountain, the dog, Bryce's dog's name is Bobo, and Bobo is a Muppet. And actually, Bobo is a major character in the new book that we're writing because it's Bryce's book, so it's his dog.
Yeah.
What other pets have I written? Oh, this is also so I don't know if you've read, probably not everyone has read this, but so Mistletoe and Mishigas, there is a bonus epilogue that is not in the book, and but it is on my website, and you can read it for free. Anyone can read it for free. I think it's like on my Patreon, and you have to sign up, but for free. Like you don't have to pay. It's like the free version or whatever. So in the epilogue, they get another animal, and that animal's name is Walter, who also is a Muppet. So every animal I have written has been named for a Muppet. It's like an inside joke Easter egg. Some people have noticed. Like I've had people tell me they're like, you have a thing for the Muppets. It's like, well, not really. I just thought it would be cute. And it's my own little like it's like my like my
An Easter egg.
yeah, it's like my little like tribute to my cats who are also named after Muppets.
To finish, my last question. If you could offer one piece of advice to aspiring writers, what would it be?
Mm, that is a very good question. I feel like there's many things I would say to people. So let me think. If I had to say one thing, I think the one thing I would tell people is to don't rush and take your time. Like how I told at the beginning, like your story deserves time and attention and not rushing. And it will it will make a difference because I feel like people can tell like when something has been rushed or not. And what I always tell people, which is maybe a bad analogy, it's like, you can go to McDonald's and get a hamburger, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like hamburgers are great, right? Like McDonald's sells millions of hamburgers. Or you can go to like a fancy restaurant and get a filet mignon. Which do you want to make, right? Like I want to make a filet mignon, and it takes time, right? You have to marinate it, and you have to age it, or I don't know what they do with it, but it's like it takes time. And then even the way you cook it, right? Like you don't just throw it on the pan and fry it up. There's like a whole way to cook it. So like treat your story that is worth telling, treat it like a filet mignon, not like like a McDonald's hamburger. That's my biggest thing that I would tell people.
And I think it's great advice. Take your time, people. Don't rush it.
Yeah.
So yeah, people, that's it for today. I want to thank Matt for taking his precious time where he could be writing to speak with me so I can share this video with all of my followers and my subscribers on Binary. That's it. Bye.